I'm Jakada Imani. I'm the director, or I was the director of the Ignite Institute. Now I'm with the Center for Popular Democracy. I'm the director of the special capacity building initiatives there. Local kid, born and raised here in the Bay Area in Oakland, just down the road. I grew up during the height of the drug war and saw firsthand what drugs and also the public sector, public policy, government, economic response was to the war, was to drugs and drug addiction and the drug trade, which was to make it more violent, more profitable, harder to get out of, make addiction more deep and painful for communities, and wanted to do something about it. So spent a number of years organizing, doing youth education, doing youth advocacy work, and came to the Ella Baker Center for Human Rights as a young person wanting to get involved in doing organizing. I knew Van Jones, our founder, and I wanted to do youth organizing, and he said to me, well, you know, I got a grant to hire a police accountability hotline organizer, and if you come and do that, you can do youth organizing on the side. And I took 2 jobs for less than the price of one, and stayed for 13 years, spending the last 5.5 as executive director, because the Ella Baker Center saw young people, people of color, immigrants, women, queer folks, transgender folks, as the solution to the problems that our society faces. And so I learned how to do public policy and advocacy, organizing, write budgets, how to do lobbying, help pass federal legislation there, and got fairly good at doing electoral work as well, and helping to frame and cut issues where I marginalized the opposition and built our coalition, and sort of, you know, saw a path forward for myself there, but had a moment of posing myself what I really believe, one of those sort of in the shower moments, right? And what I'm reminded what I really believe is that we're all profoundly rooted in spirit, what some of us call God, right? Now I'd increasingly would call it dark matter or dark energy, but we'll maybe we'll have time to come back to that, we'll see. So for me, my own sort of theology does root in this notion of, 14 billion years ago, there was this infinitesimally small thing that boom, and you get all of us and everything you see in the universe from here on, right? And I grew up sort of having a problem with Christianity a little bit. There's sort of the patriarchy and white supremacy, but then also just the rampant sort of contradiction within it. But so I was like, I'm searching for the truth. 16 billion or 14 billion years ago, boom, right, the truth. And then as I kept sort of rehearsing that story, I realized that that was a story trying to describe something that was indescribable. Because it turns out that is all from our little strange vantage point of living on this one planet, circling around this one sun, and that one planet spins around the sun, and we call that a year. That is a quite odd and random-ass unit of measurement for the history of something that predates that thing. So how could you measure how long it takes that random in the side, in the corner, in some little cut, smaller than the whole grain of sand, measure the beginning of time against that? That's just a story, so our human brains can grasp and make sense of it. Now, it turns out the stories that our ancestors told themselves, similarly. Just as there is truth, not necessarily all fact, because we can debate, and some of my scientific friends will, about was it actually 14 or 13.98, right? So we can debate about the accuracy of that story, just like we can debate about and how in the Old Testament it says in the beginning there was God. We can debate that, but there are truths in it that transcend the facts in it. And those truths provide meaning for life. And they stretch back. Almost every community and tradition has it. This way of instilling and experiencing awe through ritual, through story, through dance, through music, that allows us to touch that thing that is beyond touching. One of my good friends who works over at Pacific School of Religion, where I just finished up a tour of duty, says that, theology, God talk, is a finger pointing the way towards the moon. And we often get confusing the finger for the moon. The finger's not the moon. Describing what I would call creation, the universe, is beyond words. It's ineffable. We don't have words for it. They always pale in comparison, but we try because we want to know who we are and whose we are. So we give it words and language to try to give it shape so that we can draw that circle and say, well, I'm on the team. I'm part of this, right? And so those are those ancient stories. And so for me, doing social justice work, I wanted to understand how those stories animated my ancestors. Being black and from Oakland, I inherited the legacy of not just the Black Power movement, but what some people call the Civil Rights Movement, what my elders called the Black Freedom Struggle that started in the southern United States. So my family comes through that struggle. And when I showed up on the scene, wanting to fight the power, put things right, I didn't have access to what I now know to be a well of black spirituality that extends beyond the church, beyond Islam, into the black community writ large in some ways. And as I began to look and do my research, what I first came to was, we have this thing, and it just happened a few months ago, where we celebrate Dr. King. And here's a little secret. He was actually the Reverend Dr. King. And all the people here who know how the honorifics work, the Reverend comes first, because God comes first, right? So, but we have turned him to Dr. King, this man of letters and letters, super important. But he was profoundly rooted in his explicit spiritual experience. That for him, being a disciple of Christ called him to do the works in the world that he did. So let me share with a little about you, with his background, and some of which you will know, but to try to give it some context for the Black freedom struggle. The Reverend King came from a family of wealth and means. He, after all, in the 50s had a PhD, a black man from the South. His father was the senior minister at a big church in Atlanta, Georgia, and King Jr., he had his eyes on his father's pulpit. He grew up in that church, and he was like, I know what I'm finna do. I'm gonna go to school, I'm gonna get this, I'm gonna start over here in this little church, and I'm gonna work my way back home to Georgia, right? And a little thing happened. Because of what he believed in, because of what his commitments were, and because of the path he was on, he ended up at this small little church in Albany, Georgia. And the women of this church had organized a boycott of the buses because of segregation. And they said to this bright, new, shiny, young, promising minister, we need you to lead this boycott. And he said, no, ma'am. See, I'm a PK, I'm a preacher's kid. Preacher's kids, we don't do that kind of thing. And I'm just a newly ordained minister, and I look around at all the other ministers. You see them out there doing that? We don't do that there. I'm just here for a minute now, and then I'm going on home. So I don't want no trouble. I'm just gonna go ahead and do my job in this pulpit. And they said, boy, if you don't get out there in them streets, we brought you here and we will send you home. And so he found himself marching with these folks. And as he found himself marching with these folks, every day when you read the letters that he wrote and the letters from other organizers in the Southern Leadership Conference, they studied and they read the Bible in a really real way. Not in a real way like in the sort of sense that necessarily that they thought everything that happened, that's said in the book, though I'm sure some of them did. But in a real way, like how do we apply these lessons of who we're being called to be? If Jesus lined himself up on the side of the poor in a way that he was executed by the Roman Empire for proclaiming that we are all children of God and they can't tell us what to do, right? We're told now that these little stories in the Bible, like where Jesus says, well, give unto Rome what is Rome, render unto Caesar what is Caesar's, and give unto God what is God's, as if that's some sort of like separation of church and state. It wasn't. It was saying all of that, it don't matter because of who you are and what your life is about is not about Caesar's money and coin. It's about your entire life and existence and aligning that with a more deep and profound calling than money can ever buy. And so the Reverend Dr. King being a good boy, he had a plan to be good, right, and responsible, not to be out, and first called to be a spokesman for his people. But then realized at a moment that he had to stand up if he's going to do right and understand and follow this calling that he was so inspired to do, that he had to speak out against the Vietnam War, which most of the black people around him said, boy, don't you start. Nothing with the, And he was like, look, right is right and wrong is wrong. I'm going to do it. And then towards the end of his life, he said, look, this is not just about black people. This country has done poor people wrong. This is about justice and democracy for everybody. So we're going to do a poor people's campaign, and we're going to, right? So he followed all the way through. Now, over 50 years later, here's a funny thing, just to watch how things change. You would think, and I've met some old beautiful pastors and people who were around in the era, that everybody was in the street marching with Dr. King. Everybody was, just out in the streets. Now, what the data suggests is less than 12% of black churches took part in the black freedom struggle directly. Because the land that was owned on, the denominations they were a part of, they didn't want no trouble. And just like in Ferguson 2 years ago, when the church doors stayed shut and they didn't get out there and help them kids, a little bit like that. But something's happened because of what the Reverend King now means to us because of his awe-inspiring. We can listen to the speech, that I Have a Dream speech. Like, if you listen to it like full all the way through and not just the I Have a Dream part, which is, not the crescendo is always good, but don't listen to the end of a sermon. That's not how that works. It's just don't read the cliff notes. Just listen to the whole thing, right? He lays out a vision that still we're striving for, right? And that vision is a little bit back towards this beloved community, back towards this like infinitesimally small spot where we're all connected and related in a beautiful, loving, healing, transformative way. That's the thing. He was a good orator, and the boy was cute and all, yes. And the thing he's pointing at, the thing he's calling us for, the thing that makes our heart sing is this vision. This vision that's, I think, is held in all of us a little bit because we know that we come from it, and we're craving to get back to it. And he lays out a vision for how to do that. And I think that when all of us, and part of my work for a while and still is helping people find that thing in them and give it voice, give it a ritual, give it a touchstone so they can come back to it again and again and again because we build that habit. So if we do this thing of awe at a micro level and we just start acting like asses, what if that was like our daily meditation? All day, every day, that's what we were steeped in. If that was our work, what we did to put food on the table, our interactions with our loved ones, who would we be in the world? When it's written that Jesus says, greater acts than this you will do, what if we took that seriously? I was actually having a conversation with some younger ministers this morning, and I said that, and the woman said, but I can't swim. And that was brilliant, because I was like, I don't think you was listening when Jesus said that. He was walking on water, and you said, I can't swim. He wasn't swimming. But if we took seriously, because I think there's this contradiction that's beautiful, right? Like this thing of like how small we are. Hasidic Jews carry this two things in their pocket, I'm told by one of my friends. One is this note that says, from dust I came and dust I'll return, and that the entire universe is mine. And they keep one in each pocket, because both things are true. So if we hold in that everything is not about us, right, through that sense of awe, but then we hold in that we are the direct descendants of the universe, of everything in creation, that stars gave their lives for the molecules in our bodies. Who are we then not to take on big, hairy, audacious things? Who is us to say, well, that's too big for me? Well, damn damn, a star gave its life for you, and you just gonna waste yours on some like, I don't know if I want to say something in this meeting. So if we can hold that contradiction, which is hard, and vacillate in between like realizing that we are descended from the creation of the universe and from dust we came and to dust will return, it liberates us to act boldly, courageously, creatively, and collectively. Ashe.